Hi everybody, and welcome to episode 15, I think it's 15, of the Livestreaming Rebels with me, Mark Orr, and him over there, Dan Wilkinson from DW Media, both of us from DW Media. We have an exciting show. The first time ever we have had a live guest on the show. It has caused, I've got to be honest, it has caused a couple of technical challenges. Mainly because I've switched across to a different device to actually run the show today. So I'm actually on my laptop. So I've had to rebuild most of the show on my laptop, whereas I normally run it on my desktop. I'm currently suffering with slight echo in my headphones because of this, which I haven't managed to sort out. So if I start talking gibberish, that's the norm. Pretty much, so don't expect anything different. I do remember and recall this happening to James Haskell, who was a former rugby player and presenter now, and he was on a Sky show, and he had exactly the same problem. People actually thought he was drunk because he couldn't speak properly because he was hearing the echo in the headphones or in his talkback system. So anyway, I digress. As I said, we've got a really, really exciting show to do. We have a guest who I've known for a few years now, and he is somebody that I've kind of followed for quite some time in the live streaming space, and we've got the chance to actually grill him a little bit today and find out how he got started doing live streaming, because it was very different from his original background, and also get the chance to ask him some questions along the lines of if somebody wanted to get started live streaming today, what would they need to do, what are the things they have to consider, what challenges they're probably going to overcome. I can probably tell you most of those ones. I've probably overcome most of them, or some of them not. So he's an absolute genius when it comes to this kind of stuff. Anyway, let's get on to kicking things off. But how are you, first of all, Dan?
I'm all right. Can you hear me? Is the first? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
I had a bit of an issue with the mic. I just sort of vanished a little bit before to fix it. I'm all right, and a cracking excuse for you sounding drunk at 2 p.m. Not sure what I think about that one.
Well, you just got to take the rough with the smooth, you know. I can make all the excuses I want, but the true reason behind it is definitely this echo, which I've done before and I've tried to overcome on a call. I remember years ago doing this on a platform that escapes me, and all I could hear was myself back, and it's a really peculiar sensation. But hopefully I've managed to adjust it where it's I can still continue. I can still speak in a manner as best I normally can. So Ian's probably wishing he'd never bothered coming on this show now. It's so unprofessional. But there again, I suppose we are highlighting some of the challenges that can face people when they try and go live. So I've mentioned them enough. I think we need to get actually on the show, and let's introduce Ian Anderson-Gray. How are you doing, Ian?
I'm doing really well. Yeah, thank you for having me on the show. And it's just blame me for all the technical problems, because this show has been going so smoothly until you decided to ask me on the show. So,
well, you say that, Ian. You say it's been going so smoothly. Have you actually seen any of the previous episodes?
I have seen some of them. Yeah.
Oh, okay. There we go. There's another lurker for us, Dan.
It's our one viewer.
It's 1.1. So it's one of those things. These things are sent to try us, and inevitably they do when you try and do something a little bit different. As I say, I'd completely rebuilt the show. I say completely. I hadn't. I'd built parts of it yesterday because this was quite a last minute thing for us. But I think that's kind of the whole beauty of live is that you can pretty much do it instantaneously if you've got a little bit of knowledge, the right kind of platforms, the odd bit of gear that just helps enhance so people can actually hear what you're saying and see what you're doing.
Yeah.
But live streaming, I think, if I take us back to my first days when I used to do broadcast TV, it was so expensive to do that kind of stuff. I think they used to bandy figures around about 20 grand a minute to actually produce some content for broadcast TV. And then, obviously now, come all the way forward, we carry around a device that allows us to go live instantaneously onto lots of social media platforms and have a conversation, impart knowledge, and it's really, really powerful. The technology astounds me in where it's going, but I suppose one of the things for a lot of people is, and this is a question I really want to throw at you, Ian, and kind of how you got started, was why did you decide to go live, and why would you advise somebody to use live streaming within their video marketing mix and the whole sort of the whole marketing mix, not just video stuff? So
Yeah, well, I think that they're kind of two different questions, because I first went live. Well, I mean, if we could talk about Google Hangouts on air, because I do remember going on a show back when Google Plus was a thing. But the first time I properly went live was in 2016 when Facebook Live became a thing, and I kind of, in some ways, quite reluctantly went live for the first time, because I've always been one to follow my curiosity, and Facebook Live came about, and Facebook Live was really only in the US initially, and then then kind of came out to other parts of the world. But it was only really for iOS users, and I was an Android user at the time. And I discovered a way that you could go live from your computer using software called OBS Studio. But at the time, this was all very new. It was very complicated for most people. Most people just couldn't get it working. So that really annoys me when something is overly complicated and overly geeky in a way that stops people from embracing the technology. That's when I kind of kick into gear, and I looked at how we can make this simple. And so I created a course on OBS Studio. I wrote articles on it. This article went viral. There was one problem with all of that. I wasn't actually really going live properly myself. And I realized if I'm teaching people how to do this thing, I need to actually get over my own fears and embrace live video. So answering your question, the reason I first went live was following my curiosity and embracing this new technology. Why people should go live today might be a different question. It might be following your curiosity, but it might also be because you want to grow your audience. You want to grow your community, because live video is an amazing way to grow your community and actually talk with your audience, talk with your clients, talk with your customers. But it's also an amazing way to get over perfectionism and procrastination. I've always struggled with this. I'm a chronic, or I'm going to say I'm a recovering perfectionist. And with live video, the great thing about this is that yes, you need to prepare. You need to get all the tech as sorted as much as you possibly can before you press that go live button. But then you go live, you're creating content. And you're not procrastinating, because you can't. You just have to do it. And so this is a great way for us to create content. Not only do we have a live audience, but we're also creating that content quickly and easily once you get started. And also it's great for repurposing as well. So there's lots of reasons why I think people should embrace live video.
I think for me, one of the reasons that I started to go live was very much from that same perspective of procrastination. But as a video editor, if I'm left to my own devices and I focus on polishing it, making it perfect, that becomes a barrier. Whereas if I go live, as you say, I'm creating content, I'm getting on with it, and I can move on to something else, and I'm not faffing, for want of a better word, forevermore, just, titivating it, making it just Is it ever perfect? Probably not. You can always pull it to bits in some way, shape or form. But yeah, for me, it was always about that. Just get out there, get it done. And there's no follow up. There can be, because you can take snippets out of it. You can repurpose a lot of stuff. But that takes away the onerous task of having to create an edited, polished version in the first place, and then to pull the snippets out, etc. So I suppose you're not double handling the content in that respect. Yeah. So it's a very valid point. And Dan's very, very similar. He's an editor as well, and you know, we both kind of go, live gives us a vehicle to get a message across, to impart knowledge, but to do it in a way that is efficient, I think, more than anything else. Yeah, if you can overcome the challenges of the tech, and I appreciate what you're saying about OBS, because that was the platform I first started with. I've probably tried pretty much most of them out there now, and I've settled on the one that suits me. And I think it suits me because it gives me a lot of flexibility and a lot of control over how a program looks and feels, and I can introduce a lot of automation into it as well, which eliminates some of those other barriers of panicking when you haven't pressed this button or that button. But that's just my own personal way of dealing with stuff. So yeah, very valid point about just using it to go live and getting your message out there. Yeah, I feel as if I'm waffling a bit, but that's one of those. That's what we do on this show, Ian. If you've seen one of them before, you understand. It's off the cuff. It's authentic.
Well, that's what. Yeah, you see, I think this is. You know, you were talking about perfectionism, and you go on YouTube, and there is this. A lot of the videos we see on YouTube they're not perfect, but they are very slick and very highly edited, and that's fine, and we like that, but people actually also want to connect with people on a much more authentic level, and to see how you talk. And if you try and make things too perfect, that can actually put people off. So I think there's a sweet spot. On one hand, you don't want it to be a complete dog's dinner. You want to at least people to be able to hear you and see you. You don't want to be rambling too much off, onto different tangents. But you don't want it to be completely kind of like perfect either, because that can put people off as well. So I think we're going to get more of this as AI becomes more of a thing. I mean, it already is a big thing, but it's going to, obviously, in the next few years, it's going to explode exponentially. I actually think we as human beings are going to be wanting more authentic human connection. And so I actually think live video is going to become a bigger thing over the next few years. That's my thought. I could be completely wrong, but I think that's what people want, more human connection.
I think you're definitely right. And I think for me as well, there's a massive disconnect, or can be a massive disconnect, between highly polished video and somebody creating a persona on video than being live, because you get the true person. And if you go and meet that person, or you come across that person in real life, and you find they're a completely different person, completely different character, for me, there's a massive disconnect. But if they are true to themselves when they're actually on a live, and then you meet them and you go, yeah, they're exactly that person. And that's ultimately what Dan and I try and achieve with this. And I know you do, Ian. I've met you in person on multiple occasions, and you are the person that I see when I see you on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, LinkedIn, wherever. You are that person. There is no strange anomaly of this other character appearing when I see you in person. So for me, it's about that genuine article.
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. I have this thing that I teach called heightened authenticity, because I think it's important to be ourselves on live. It's really obvious if you're not. I can't actually watch broadcasts from people where they're putting on this persona, because it's kind of so obvious. They might not think it themselves. And I get it, because we're just so many of us are worried about being judged. We're worried about people thinking that we need to be somebody else, and we're a lot of us will compare ourselves to others and trying to be more energetic. You might be quite a shy person, an introverted person, and you're comparing yourself to somebody who's like hyper energetic. You're never going to be like them, so don't try to be. However, this is where the heightened bit of the heightened authenticity comes into the play. If you're quite a shy person, quite an introverted person, then you can still raise the energy levels a little bit. Not too much, you know, so if you're quite a shy person and you come on a live show and you go, hello, it's great to be here, you know, that's going to be, it's not going to work. But you can be a little bit more energetic than maybe if you came on and spoke like this and nobody can hear you. That energy level is too low for video. So you need to raise the energy levels a little bit, but you need to be yourself as well. So I think and the only way to get better at that is to practice and to get on some live shows and just do it. That's the only way.
So that brings me nicely to asking the question, actually, Ian, about you started 2016, I think you said, didn't you? Was it 16? Yeah. I think I started the year after you doing live stuff, and I was set a challenge, funnily enough, by Andrew and Pete, who we all know from Atomic, and they challenged me to go live for 30 days on Facebook and just do whatever live, just talk about whatever I deemed that I wanted to talk about. And if I go back, and that content's still kicking about there somewhere, if I look at day one and my presence on camera to my day 29, because I think I didn't quite manage the 30 days, I think I missed one day because I was traveling or something, I just couldn't do it. But the difference in me and my camera persona was massive, and that is from somebody who's used to being behind the camera, suddenly to be in front of it was a scary proposition for me. But to see the journey to go from, you know, an absolute, you know, deer in the headlights, scared rabbit, that's what I was going to say, to feeling pretty confident and being able to do it. Yes, I might waffle, I might talk utter rubbish at times. That's subjective, but I think it can happen. You know that, but being able to do it and just put yourself out there. There is no magic wand, and I say this to everybody, no matter whether it's live or whether it's doing pre-recorded stuff. There's no magic wand. You've just got to go out there and do it and practice. You will get better. You should get better. Great to have a coach, somebody like yourself, Ian, who can kind of teach you some of the nuances of how to get the best out yourself, how to get the best out your guests, what to do with some of the tech challenges, etc., can be massively helpful. But I think just, you know, being consistent, which is something that I've struggled with in the past, and I haven't always been able to be consistent on live video. That is where I think teaming up with Dan and having somebody that you can do it with. I know you've done that in the past, Ian, where you've collaborated with somebody on a live show, and I think that kind of dynamic between two people can be a little bit more helpful to get you used to doing stuff. But it's definitely a journey, and I think that's what you've got to remember with anything that is pushing you outside your comfort zone. It's a journey. Where you begin and where you end up are two very different places. And just doing it over and over again and practice. I think is the only way to do it.
It's so true. It's so true. And I think you probably would not have liked me saying this as you were before today's live, as you were trying to fix the problem of the echo. But actually, I got to a point when I actually really enjoyed when things went wrong, because it sounds so weird to say this, but because it meant that I could add that to my process and fix it so it wouldn't happen again, so that I was not perfecting it, but I was getting better each time. So if I discovered a problem that I hadn't discovered before, then I could add that to my list and I could solve that problem. Occasionally there were things like Facebook just decided to not promote my video to anyone, so I was effectively going live just to myself, and that wasn't my fault, that was Facebook's fault. Or maybe the software I was using had a bug. It was a really weird bug. I had a guest on, and for some reason the software would just, when I went to the scene with my guest, it would just zoom in like into the middle of the screen, like, so you could basically just see the nose of my guest, and I had to kind of keep on manually bringing it back each time. But that, I think that's a good thing, and it also, I think the other thing I've learned to do when mistakes happen is just to have fun and laugh at them. Don't take yourself too seriously. And this was really hard, because right at the start, I wanted things to be perfect. And when things went wrong, I got really stressed. People who are watching you aren't going to get stressed unless you get stressed. And this reminds me of one thing I haven't mentioned today. I actually trained as a professional classical singer. And I always remember when I was singing on stage, if I made a mistake, I knew about it, but most people in the audience did not know about it. So as long as I just kept on carrying on, made it look like I had not made a mistake and looked confident, the audience would enjoy it. But if I started to make it really obvious that I made a mistake, maybe I'd grimace, or I'd even stop and say sorry or something like that, then that's when the audience start to get stressed, and you've got to bring the audience along with you. They are actually the most important part of the live stream. If you have a guest on, the most important person on your show is still your audience, then it's your guest, and then it's you. So don't take yourself too seriously. And that's been a real journey for me. I always really struggled with that at the start.
Yeah, very valid point. Thinking about why you're doing this thing in the first place. What is it that you're trying to achieve?
Yeah.
And as you say, it's about your audience first. And I think that thing about laughing at yourself and not taking yourself too seriously and not wanting it to be 100% perfect was one of the reasons that we didn't get started doing a live show. Kept putting it off, and because I wanted it, to look like this and like that, and have it do this, have it do that. And it's, in the end, I just said to Dan, look, we're going to have to draw a line in the sand here, and we're actually just going to have to do it. We know it's not going to be brilliant at the start, but we can iterate, we can improve as we move. And I think that is really helpful when you're kind of teaching people this stuff, because you can say, well, look, this is where I started. It wasn't great, but I just got out there and I did it. And I think, you need to see like I said before, the journey to go from starting to the end. And I think people are a little bit reticent about showing, what it used to be like and seeing the improvements. But I think that's a massive thing for people, is to see what people have done to make it better. Talk about it. I mean, that's one of the things that we set out to do with our show, was to tell people exactly what we were doing. When we were producing a live show, how we do it, how we connect the dots, basically, with different bits of kit and different bits of software, etc. And talk about, new tech as it comes along, because people aren't necessarily aware of it. We had a conversation this morning when you were testing out Instagram live from a desktop. There are some nuances in there that you've covered. It's such a new thing that not everybody's going to be an expert at it straight away. But how do we learn? By seeing other people do it and having them tell us what the problems are, the challenges, the hurdles, and how we can overcome them. So I think you talking before about how you found a challenge and a problem, addressed it to make sure it didn't happen again, but then you tell people about that so that they can learn from it as well. And I think that's massively important, to position yourself as a resource that people can come to be able to improve and make adjustments on the way, etc.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
Yeah. I feel that we've kind of left Dan stuck in the corner there, not saying a lot. So, please come and join us, Daniel. You are part of this conversation. Any particular questions that you feel you want to ask?
I've just been confusing you with continuity of taking this jumper on and off, because I go from being very cold to very warm. I'm not well at the moment, but yes, I do have one question. What is sort of your ideal client, and is there ever anyone that you don't recommend live to, or can everyone do live somewhere in a business, do you think? I know it's a very broad question, but there we are. Yeah,
no, it's a great question. So I'm reluctant to say everyone should embrace live. I think everyone can do it, unless some people are just so shy, so nervous, that it may take a huge amount of work to get them to embrace it, and the returns may not be worth it. But I do love working with people who are shy, who are introverted, who they have something they have a message they want to give and share, and they grow their business through live. And I think everyone has a voice. So I would still say, if you can try and embrace it, then do. I think in terms of business, most businesses can use live video. It just needs to be done in a way that is authentic and is not just focused on yourself. I see so many businesses going live and then ignoring the comments, and just doing it for themselves almost. And I think that's not good. So in terms of like a perfect client, I mean, I really enjoy working with solopreneurs, coaches, consultants, entrepreneurs who they want to go live. They're really focused on it. They just want to get on with it, but the tech is maybe kind of getting in the way, or they're lacking in confidence, or they want to improve their communication. They're the kind of people that I really love working with. But I also, do love working with corporates as well. Depends on the business, but I really enjoy that as well. Depends, it could be, I've done some live video production work, mainly virtual, which I enjoy. But I also enjoy the consultancy and coaching side of things as well. I think that is something I really enjoy. But yeah, I think most businesses can definitely embrace live video. It's got as we talked about earlier, there's so many advantages with it, and it's a great way to turn the camera, really, in a sense, on your audience, on your customers. Because yes, you're technically going to be on camera, but the comments, the people who are commenting, they are your audience, and they are able to ask you questions as well. And I can actually see there's a comment here from Tim Sorn, speaking of comments, and he says having a co-host definitely helps with accountability. So I think the fact that you guys have joined together, it makes a massive difference, because I tried to do this on my own, and talking on your own for an hour is quite challenging. So I think it's good if you have somebody else to do it with you. And so I'd always recommend, if you are a business and you're wanting to launch a live, don't just do it on your own. Do bring a co-host along. Makes it a lot easier.
I think another good point about using a co-host as well is that you can almost turn it into a sort of a fly on the wall conversation about your business. Yeah. So, people can kind of eavesdrop. I think people refer to it as a fireside chat quite often. And I think that can be really powerful. But again, that's a really authentic way to do getting a message across, basically. So you have intent behind it, but the manner in which you have the conversation is very relaxed, or can be if you've got the right co-host. And I think you can get people to warm to that kind of style rather than it being a presentation, which a lot of people fall foul of, and ultimately, trip themselves up, because I think especially in the corporate world, when there are so many buzzwords and so many things that they are told that they have to say, and if they miss them out, they feel as if they've completely ruined the whole message behind the intent. And so I think, when you can be relaxed about it, and you can have a relaxed conversation with somebody, and you can get the best out of them, I think there's a real skill in that. It's funny that somebody just mentioned that recently to me. There's a real skill in being able to get somebody comfortable on camera or on a live, etc., whatever it is. So I think trying to do that on your own is really, really challenging, really difficult, and probably doesn't suit the majority of people. But if you can hone those skills, then I think there's definitely a power in that.
I think it is good to do some on your own, but it is hard. And so when I launched my live show back in 2019, it was going to be what would you call it, like a hybrid show, in the sense that like some episodes were going to be just me speaking, and then I'd have a guest. And actually, the first 3 or 4, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this, but the first like 4 or 5 of my shows were just me speaking. And I did find it really hard, but I'm so glad that I did that, because it just got me getting better, really. And what you were saying before about corporates reminded me of a time when I was working with a corporate, and it wouldn't say it was a disaster, but it was difficult in the sense that my job. So I was brought in as I wasn't really in charge of the project, but I was basically there just to manage the live stream part of it. And the idea is it was going to be live interviews with the CEO and some of the other leaders in the business. And quickly they realized that they didn't like this, because they realized there was stuttering and stammering, and what would happen if they said something wrong? It would be the end of the world. And so it ended up being pre-recorded. We were using StreamYard for this. And so instead of going live, it was recorded. And then an editor went in and edited out all the ums and the ers. And then they even sped it up. They did it to 1.3 speed as well. And the end of it, the result was, yes, there were no kind of errors, but it was just robotic. And I think they really missed a trick there, that if they just had some time to work at their communication skills, to put a bit more energy into it, but just be themselves, I think it would have been a really good experience for their customers to meet them authentically. But instead they decided to make it so-called perfect, which actually ended up being anything but. So yeah, just something to think about.
Yeah, definitely. And you've got me worried now when we're starting to talk about perfectionism and everything, because there's a comment here from somebody in Vancouver, the grammar detective, and I'm really worried
Paul,
now that
hi Paul,
that we are creating a problem where that person might well be cringing in the corner now at the communication levels, certainly from our side. Or my side at the moment, still struggling with this echo in my ears to actually speak properly, but waffling and using all sorts of weird language, but that's by the by. But that's the whole point, is getting everybody involved, is it not? So I suppose one of the things that we said that we were going to discuss as well was about people getting started. And I'd love kind of your take, Ian. And I know that you covered it earlier on by saying that if it's too complicated, it becomes a barrier and it will stop people from, taking that leap of faith and trying to go down this particular path and use live streaming. So if somebody was coming into it now, what would you advise them would be the first steps or platforms or equipment that they would need to consider to have something that is reasonable?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. It's also a huge question, and we could like dedicate a whole show to this, I'm sure. It doesn't matter whether you are like us and be obsessed by technology. We all love our gear here, or whether the gear, you have a fear of the gear. So you could either have gearophilia or gearophobia. Whatever. I've just made those words up. The gear is not the most important thing. So the first thing that you need to do is ask the question, why are you going to go live? What is the point? And so I always, with my clients, I go through, we work through a planning document for your show. And the planning document it sounds very boring, but it's so important. It's like, well, what is this show about? What's the mission of this show? Why are you doing it? What are the reasons? And some of those reasons might be because it's fun, or it's because I want to interview amazing guests, or because I'm a perfectionist, I just want to create content. Or it could be that you want to grow your audience. But you've got really clear points of why you're going to go live and what the show's about and when you're going to go live, and all those kind of things. If you don't have that, then you're going to just never get round to doing it, and your brain's going to kind of persuade you out of it. So that's really important. And then you need to start to think about, yes, at that point, you then need to think about, well, where am I going to go live and what do I need to go live with? So with the gear side of things, unless you know that you are fully committed to this and you have a big budget, then don't spend huge amounts of money on it, certainly at first. I'm a big believer in bootstrapping your live video studio. So you could actually just go live on your phone. And if you're just starting off, and if you just want to have a little play with this, if you want it to be more raw and authentic, if it's Instagram, then any of those I would recommend go live from your phone. However, these days it's so much easier than it was to go live from your computer using some third-party software. And the software that I would recommend for beginners is probably the easiest one to use is StreamYard. Or Restream. So they are really easy to use software. There's loads of other ones out there. There's EVMux is one. There was one that used to be called Melon, and now I can't remember the name of it. There's Wave Video. Just find one that works for you. And these are all web-based. They're all browser-based software. And you can go live to Facebook. You can go live to YouTube. You can go live to LinkedIn. You could go live to lots of them at the same time if you want. But just have a little play with those. In terms of the gear, again, keep it simple. I think the most important thing to invest in right from the start is your microphone, because if your audio is really good, people are going to really listen to you. The people can put up with slightly less than perfect video, but they will not put up with less than perfect audio. So microphone-wise, I recommend the Samsung Q2U microphone. It's a dynamic microphone. It'll be in shot like mine is. So you might not like that, but the good thing about that is it's not going to pick up a lot of background noise. It's good quality. It's got an XLR socket if you want to get fancy in the future and plug it into a mixer, but you can also plug it directly into your computer, so it's really super simple. And then in terms of cameras, you can just, if you have an iPhone, you could just use your iPhone, plug it into your computer using software like Camo, and just use that as a camera. That tops most webcams I know. So that you could use that as your webcam. Or there's the Logitech cameras are good. The Elgato ones are pretty good. So just start off with that. And then over time you can get things, but you can improve the quality, you can get lighting and all that kind of stuff. But don't overcomplicate it. Just use some web-based software from the start. I'm a Mac user, so I have to give a big shout out to Ecamm Live. That's what I use all the time. It's a little bit more complicated than StreamYard, but it does some really cool things. It's kind of got the flexibility, not quite the same level of flexibility as vMix, but almost. But it's really easy to use, and I love it. So if you're a Mac user, something like Ecamm Live is great, or just start off with some software like StreamYard or Restream.
Awesome. Some great suggestions. And I think StreamYard for me was one of the first browser-based platforms that I dabbled with and found it really powerful. I do think in some respects it's been left behind by some of the other platforms now, but it's horses for courses. It's what you need it to do. And I think, unless you're like us and you try to complicate it to the point where you break it, you just need something that works and something that's simple and doesn't become another one of those barriers to actually getting it done in the first place. So nice to see Alec Dorling.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. All I was going to say is, I think for us, because we love to be creative, tools like StreamYard and Restream, the web-based platforms I'm talking about here, they can frustrate us because we want to do some really cool things. But I think if you're just starting off, sometimes those creative aspects of the software can actually get in the way and can become overwhelming. So I would suggest just start off with that. And then when you get to the point when you want to be more creative, you could use a software like Wave Video as a web-based platform, or you could use Ecamm Live if you're a Mac user, or there's the higher end stuff. There's Wirecast, there's vMix. There's a huge amount of different ones, but just start off with something simple.
Exactly. So that it doesn't become a challenge, too much of a challenge for you to overcome being in front of the camera as well as trying to run the tech at the same time. And Alec Dolin, who's joined us today, has made a very valid point in saying get a mentor behind the scenes who makes you actually press the go live button.
Yes.
I think that's quite a good point. And he says having a script as an outline. I certainly wouldn't advocate reading a script word for word, but having bullet points there so that you don't miss anything. And I think, again, that just highlights some of the things, part of your message that you've crafted that you want to deliver so that you don't miss any of the valid or salient points. But never try and read it script for word. You can tell I haven't got one.
Maybe you needed a script. You needed a script for that.
Yeah, I needed something.
What I would say there is, so I completely agree with bullet points. Definitely, don't have it all written out. Except there is an exception. I do write out the first thing I'm going to say and the last thing that I'm going to say, because I don't know about you, but when I press that go live button, my brain goes to mush. I don't know what happens. It just I sometimes will even forget my name. Who am I? What's this show about? What's the time? I don't know. But if I've got it in front of me, it's like, hello, Ian Gray. This is the Confident Live, and this is episode. I have to provide the episode number because I completely forget that as well. And then the end, because I always have my tagline at the end, and sometimes I forget that. So if I've got that written down, the middle bit, bullet points, that's fine. And sometimes I think you need reminders. So the other thing I will do is, when I first started, I needed to remind myself to look at my camera because I kept on looking at the screen. I'm now using a teleprompter, so that makes it a lot easier. But reminders like that. Other reminder that you can have is look at the comments, because if it's a live show and you've got some people watching live, then it's good to bring them in as well. So again, just in your script, just put little bullet points and little things in bold to remind you. It might also be reminding you to be a bit more energetic, because what tends to happen is you start off the show with loads of energy, and as you get through, it gets a bit more like this, and then your audience are going to fall asleep, and you don't want that, do you?
Definitely not. Yeah, Alex has just agreed that that's what he meant, not reading script word for word, but definitely bullet points. So I think it's a very valid point. Yeah, and your intro, definitely, and if not like me, but if you're trying to introduce a guest and obviously they've got a little bit of a bio that you want to read out as well, that can be really helpful, especially if it's somebody that your audience has never come across before. Just giving them a little bit of an insight rather than getting the guest to talk about themselves. You can do it either way, and there's pros and cons for both, but introducing them, I think, in an effective way is probably quite helpful in that respect. But
one thing that I've learned with this is, so in the software that I use, and I think you can do this in most, basically, when I get to read the bio of my guest, I switch to a photo of them. So I'm not on the screen, and most importantly, my guest isn't, because there's nothing, I don't know about, maybe it's being a Brit, and maybe Americans are better than this, but I get a bit embarrassed if someone's reading my biography about how amazing I am, and I'm kind of like, yeah, what do I look like at this point? Do I try and look kind of, I don't know. So having something there, but more importantly for me, reading it, I just can focus on reading the bio in front of me, and I'm not worried about being on screen. And then once I've finished that, I can switch to a scene where it's me and the guest. It's just a little hack, but I think that for me works well. I've been on shows where the host has read the bio out, and I'm on the screen and they're on the screen, and it just feels a little bit awkward. But maybe we're all different. Maybe you can get that working, but that's worked for me.
I think you're definitely right when you say that there's a big difference between the Americans and how they deal with this kind of stuff. To us reserved Brits, we are really not good at taking compliments and having praise heaped on us, that's for sure. It's definitely something that I think is kicked out of us at school. I've got to blame this is an education.
This is why I like to spend a lot of time with my American friends, because I'm hoping it's going to rub off on me a little bit of, I don't know. There's a lot more confidence, I think, with my American friends, and I don't think this beating ourselves up and not taking the praise is particularly helpful. I found this as a singer. So at the end of a performance, a few people would come up to me afterwards and say, Ian, that was amazing. Thank you so much. It was beautiful singing. And when that first happened to me, I said to them, oh, yeah, it was all right. Yeah, it wasn't that great. And I quickly realized that actually that was the worst thing to say to those people, because they really enjoyed it, and I was actually taking away their enjoyment by beating myself up in front of them. So I've learned to say thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. I'm so glad you enjoyed it too, and just to be confident in that way. But that's not really the British way, is it? And I've had to learn that.
No, you're definitely right. And I think, like you said, not only are you taking away the enjoyment that they've had, but you're almost dismissing what they've said to you. You're almost like putting them down, their comments down. So I think to react to it more positively is probably something that we should all take on board, to be honest, because it's done with genuine, praise. I can't think of the word I want to use at the moment, but yeah, it's done in an authentic way, and there's a reason why they're telling you that that you're good, basically, and that you should just accept that. But yeah, it's again one of those skills that I think we need to work on and learn. I'm going to throw it across to Dan again. Unless he's writing emails again, which I think is terrible. Shouldn't be doing that on a live show.
I am not. I was just thinking that I think next time we definitely need to do a script at the end so you don't spout rubbish like "I'll stream you later," because honestly, I'm writing down some tips on my little notebook. To avoid ending the streams with really bad catchphrases that will never be used. Maybe we'll print it on a T-shirt at some point.
The problem for that one, or the reason that one came about, is because the guys who create the software that I use, vMix, based in Australia, and there's a couple of guys who they do a live show once a month to kind of showcase improvements they made to the software and some of the development aspects that they're currently working on, and they get a lot of feedback from their audience about where they want the software to go. And one of the guys, Tim Vanderput, always finishes the show by saying "stream you later," and it's just stuck in my head, and I literally can't stop myself from saying it when we get to the end of our show. And if I don't say it, then Dan
I just do it
tends
for you,
he
because
reminds me.
Absolutely. I mean, you've got to embarrass yourself, Mark. It's life.
I do that plenty just by being in front of the camera in the first place. So it's one of those things, isn't it?
One thing I was going to speak about was sort of live streaming with purpose, because I think that's a really key thing that me and Mark had said for a while that we wanted to do something, but we didn't quite know what. And I think we had about 6 meetings, didn't we, Mark, before we actually did anything to do with live streaming. And it was just sitting down and chatting and going, we need to do a show. And I was like, I want to do a podcast. And Mark was like, I just want to do something. I just want to make content. And I think this was us for about a year or so, really, talking about producing content. And it wasn't until we started working together more this year that we sort of went, we could just do a show and talk about the setup we've just done. And then it sort of spiraled from there, but it was having that purpose of being able to actually talk about something that wasn't just sort of rabbiting on it is just rabbiting on. I'm not going to lie about that, but it's actually having a purpose behind the live stream, which I think is really important. And I just my question was really, is it hard to find that purpose in a lot of businesses, or do you think that it's quite easy to uncover in most cases?
That's a great question. I've been thinking a lot about that this year. Purpose. It's quite a deep thing, but it doesn't have to be. That's the thing. You could be using your live stream or live video as for marketing. It just could be for you to share with your audience the products that you are working on or the services that you're working on. Maybe your audience, so in your case, you're doing video and live video services. So it's a great way for you to demonstrate what is happening behind the scenes. It's a great way for people to meet you guys not in person, but on cameras, and to find out a little bit more about you. So there are loads of different reasons why you should be going live. And you need to write them down. You need to be really focused on that. When I was talking about that planning document earlier, that should be in your list of the reasons why you're going to go live, and that needs to come into every single live show that you do, and needs to be a purpose. And I can see that Alec Dorling has said this, how many people live stream without any call to action, and they just live stream for the fun of it or to impart their knowledge. And I have to say, that was kind of what I was doing at the start, and it's not necessarily wrong to do that while you're learning, just for the fun of it and to learn. But eventually, we're gonna have to grow up. We're gonna have to do it to actually, what are the business reasons for doing this? What is the strategy for doing this? And ultimately, when it comes to things like your call to action, people, your audience, actually want to know how to find out more about you and or to find out more information about what you've been talking about in today's show as well. So lots of things to think about there.
Very valid point. And I think one of the reasons that we originally started to go live was that we want to have a bit of fun, we wanted to create some content, we wanted to actually prove to people that we in inverted commas, we knew what we were doing with this stuff most of the time.
Yeah.
But the whole point is, if we hit a challenge and we find a workaround, or we find a solution to that problem, and we then talk about that in the next show, for instance, we are positioning ourselves with authority and knowledge that we can actually do this stuff. And that, Dan and I have always said, with everything that we do, we like to solve problems, because when you are reliant on tech so much, you can guarantee no matter what you do and how much time and effort you spend in trying to get everything working, there will always be something that trips you up. So the only way sometimes to actually come across these problems is to push the boundaries and find out what is actually the breaking point of something, so that you know how far you can go with things. And unless you are prepared to do that, you're never going to be able to expand your knowledge and get to grips with, changing technology. If it's a new piece of equipment or a new piece of software that you're trying to introduce, you've got to be constantly learning, because within this industry, not just this, but anything, anything techie, iterates and things move forward. Not always the right way, but sometimes they'll introduce something like a platform will change something and things break. So like you said earlier, Ian, just sort of going back to that, change is the one thing that you can rely on. Being able to adapt and be flexible, I think, is something that you need to show people, and just push all the time. So that's why we decided that we were going to talk about the stuff that we do, was just to kind of impart that knowledge, but say to people, we do understand how it works. We can help you if you suffer any issues with not getting things to work. We've gone to the nth to try and find out, how versatile these things are. So Paul, I think it was, he said, there was a grammar detective, says, do you think it's possible to grow a substantial audience with a simple content oriented edutainment show?
Yes is the answer. But it kind of depends on quite a few things. I think, first of all, it depends on what you mean by a substantial audience. Are we talking about just the live element here, or are we talking about growing like the brand? And I assume you're talking about, in your case, the grammar detective. So I think live can be an aspect of that, but I think you have to focus on other areas too. So such as YouTube, standard YouTube videos, potentially on other platforms, if you're into Reels or even TikToks and things like that. So I think you need to have a multi-pronged kind of attack, in a sense, on this. The live aspect these days is, on its own, I think, is unlikely to help you grow to where you want to go to. I hate to say that, but I think it's part of that. I think you have to do other things as well. But it also, I think it depends on how engaging it is and how fun it is. You've mentioned edutainment, so obviously it's educational, but you want it to be entertaining as well. So I think it can be. I think if you get engaged with the audience, if you make it fun, if you're standing out, then I think absolutely it can be. And I think he's asking, are there any shows that have hit it big? There are. I can't think of any off the top of my head at the moment. It's always very
Did Joe
forgetful when it comes to
Rogan
this.
not start out doing live, or was he all just pre-recorded?
It's a really good question. I don't know. And the Joe Rogan thing is an interesting one because I know he's a bit of a divisive character, but what's interesting about Joe Rogan is that you wouldn't kind of think that he would be that popular, in the sense that he's just talking to guests in a room about life and stuff. And also his podcasts and videos are like sometimes 2, 3, even 4 hours long. So he kind of breaks all the rules in a sense, yet his podcast is one of the biggest podcast in the world. And I know he certainly does some of them live. And so I think it kind of depends, is the topic that you are talking about, is it something that people are really crying out for? And in the case of Joe Rogan, obviously that's the case. People are really wanting to talk about deep and meaningful things. So yeah, it kind of depends. I think it depends on the area. And I found for me, my area is obviously on my show is about live video itself. So it's very, very niche. And I'm not going to get a huge audience. I'm not going to get hundreds or thousands of people watching me live. I have to be okay with that. If I was to change to something a bit broader or something, I don't know, go down the Joe Rogan route, maybe I would get hundreds or thousands of people. But you've got to also ask the question, and I don't know whether this is helpful for Paul, does your business model actually require you to have a substantial audience? Or can you actually make a lot of revenue from 10 people watching you live? Because if you get 2 or 3 people signing up, and you've got 2 or 3 new clients a week, then that's going to really be a big thing for your business. Now, there's a client of mine who goes live every single week, and he doesn't have that many people watching him live. But every single week, he gets a new client without fail. And that really moves his business on. So I think we have to be careful with numbers. And I'm not talking about you, Paul, here at all. I'm talking about me here, that there is an element of the vanity statistics. I think we all do it to a certain extent. And Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn really don't make this easy for us, because we see that big number on the top left-hand corner of the screen. And if it's a big fat 0 when we're going live, that doesn't really make you feel very good. Or if it's less than 10 people watching you live, again, you can start to think, oh, well, what's the point in this? But what you don't realize is that there may be people watching, lurking in the background, who have never commented, but they actually keep seeing you popping up, and they're watching you. They might not watch the whole live. They may only kind of pop in for a minute or 2, but they're still seeing you. They're really intrigued by you. And this has happened to me loads. It's really annoying because I wish more people would watch live and more people would comment, but it's usually the lurkers that become the customers. So don't worry so much about that number, because of course you've not just got your live viewers, you've got your replay viewers as well in the future. And if you repurpose it into a podcast like I do, you've got your podcast listeners as well. So yeah, don't think too much about those numbers.
That's definitely something that we found as well, Ian, is that we don't necessarily get a lot of live viewers on our shows, and that is because partly due to our own inconsistency of when we go live sometimes, because work takes precedent and we can't always stick to a schedule of time and dates. But what we have found is that when we've been out at events and we've been talking to people, they've happened to say in conversation, oh, actually, I saw one of your live streams and you were talking about X, Y, and it was really interesting. Yeah. And for us, that is a huge compliment that people are prepared to actually tell us that they've watched it. They don't don't have to. They could have glazed over it. They could have never mentioned it. But it is about thinking that people will see this thing on the replay. They won't necessarily be live. But it's what resonates with them. So if you can have those conversations, and it comes back to what I covered earlier on in the show, was that authenticity of who you are in real person as to who you are when they see you on a live or in front of a camera, and making sure there's no disconnect there between you and your persona. That we are literally building exposure for ourselves. So we're positioning ourselves as, hopefully the go-to people, that people, when they are ready for our services, they will go, oh yeah, these guys keep appearing in my newsfeed doing lives, so they must know what they're doing if they're constantly doing lives. And hopefully they'll connect the dots and say, yeah, okay, well, we'll give these guys a ring. So that's ultimately the approach that we use. I'm not saying it's right for everybody, but when it comes to the metrics, the numbers that you talked about, and you're right that people get sucked into the vanity numbers, but all it takes is the one right person to see some of your content and take the next step. Doesn't matter whether it's 100 people, it just takes one, and that's what you've got to focus on.
So like the person that I do want to bring up here is Lou Mangello. So he has I can't remember the name of his company, but he used to be a lawyer in the States, and now he basically his business is Disney, would you believe? And he has all these he goes on these he basically knows everything there is to know about Disney, and he has all these events that he holds at Disney hotels, and he helps businesses I suppose put a bit of fun in their business as well. And he's been live streaming since probably the mid noughties, and he gets loads of people watching him live, and I'm talking hundreds of people watching him live. But he treats his lives. He doesn't do them in this format like a talking show. He just gets in front of the camera. He sits back in his chair and he has a conversation with his audience, and they're very much community focused. So there are different ways you can do lives. You can do this kind of format, you can do a community focused one, but I think for him, he's always focused on that community. He's focused on this niche, which is Disney, and finding it's not just kids that love Disney, it's also there are grown men and women who absolutely love Disney as well, and he's just tapped into that part of the world, that community of people who they all share this passion. And if you can tap into a community where people are really passionate about something, and you are bringing those people together, so you're not just imparting your knowledge, but you're also having all these conversations happening in the chat, then you're onto a winner. So I think creating other content, but also using live as a community part, I think is really powerful. And it's check out Lou Mangello. He does an amazing job.
I think finding your tribe definitely is an area that I think a lot of people need to maybe spend more focused time on, and not just, like we've mentioned, and kind of browbeating people into thinking, don't just go live for the sake of going live, unless it's something that you're just starting off in your journey and you just want to get to grips with, the operation of going live, but have a purpose, have a reason for doing it. Like you do with anything that you would do in your business, any marketing you would do in your business, it should have a purpose and a call to action, which I think on this particular occasion, we might not have one. Apart from, like we usually say, if you've got any questions over anything that we've covered today, you want us to go more in depth about any of the tech, any of the equipment that we use, the equipment that Ian uses, then by all means put a comment in and we'll address it certainly in a future show. Ian, I'm very aware that we have gone past the hour time now. We did start a little bit late due to these technical challenges that we encountered at the start of the show. I am so appreciative of you coming on the show. We've talked about being on one or other of each other's shows for such a long time and just never managed to do it. So I really do thank you for agreeing to be our first live guest on the show. Hopefully not the last.
I haven't put you off too much.
No, not at all. And we would actually love to invite you back if there's anything that you want to talk about as well, you know, that would be suitable for our guys as well. So live streaming is definitely an area that I think is going to continue to expand, and it's going to, or should I say, we're going to find there's a lot more noise out there. So I think being able to go live and cut through that noise in a way that is effective and efficient for your business, I think is an area that a lot of people perhaps don't quite understand the power of yet. And getting the speed of message out there, I think, is massively important. And people miss that opportunity sometimes, that a live video could actually get a message to somebody in a much more powerful way than text or a visual, you know, like a photograph could, because you can impart that. Again, words escape me today for some reason. I'm not even sure what I was trying to say there now. I've had a complete brain fog. Yeah. It'll come to me. It'll come to me.
It'll
emotion.
Come to just
you can
as
get
you
emotion.
press it.
Yeah. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, you can get the emotion in there, etc., where you can't always. Yeah, it's genuine, I think, is what I was trying to say. But thanks again, Ian. If people want to find out a little bit more about yourself and what it is that you do and some of the offerings that you have, where is the best place for them to connect with you?
Thanks. Yeah, the best place is my website, which is iag.me. That's the place. And I have carelessly scattered myself across all the interwebs and the socials, so you can follow me in most places there as well. So I'd love to connect. And yeah, if I can help with anything, please let me know.
Awesome. Thanks again, Ian. Hopefully we'll see you in the not too distant future at an in-person event. Look forward to it. I think Atomicon was probably the last time we saw each other.
I think so. Yeah.
And up in Edinburgh at Adventures in Marketing before that. Are you going to be at next year's event?
Unfortunately not, but I'm going to be there's a Tube Fest happening in Birmingham, I think in May. So
Yes.
That's probably the next one that's in my diary, but there may be other ones. I don't know. I haven't quite decided yet. I'll figure it out.
Awesome. Right. Well, thanks again for joining us. Have a great day, everybody. We've thoroughly enjoyed it. We've certainly enjoyed having our first guest on. I don't think Dan fell asleep too many times during this one because I tended to hog kind of the hosting duties on this one. But, you know, these things happen. But till next time, which hopefully, well, I was going to say it should be a fortnight's time, but it won't be because Christmas is just around the corner. So I think this is the last one for December. So we'll probably see you early January for the next one. So take care, everybody. And I'm not going to say it. We will see you
I'll
later.
stream you later.
Oh, he did it. He did it. Terrible. Daniel, you're sacked.